Well, we are so excited here to talk more about our Fox 43
Yes.
Book Club pick of the month. Now, Kayleigh and I are here to introduce someone very special. Kim, can you say hi?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for reading Bachelor Girl.
Yes. So we're just going to pick her brain, talk a
Mhm.
little bit about the book, what went into the process of writing the book, and we have a little Easter egg because
Oh,
another
yes.
book is
It's
coming.
in the works.
So why don't we start off with maybe you putting us in your shoes when you started writing Bachelor Girl?
Well, it was really interesting because I was actually researching my first book, Orphan Number 8, which is mostly set in the real place that inspired it was the Hebrew Orphan Asylum, where my own grandfather grew up. But in the novels, you see it as the orphaned Hebrew's home. So it's a little fictionalized. And this incident where the New York Yankees almost bought the property of the orphanage to build Yankee Stadium in Harlem, that was a real thing I came across when I was researching the orphanage. It was front page news in the New York Times, and I think it was 1921. And it just kind of started me down this rabbit hole about Jacob Rupert and Babe Ruth. And I don't have a strong sports background, but there were so many interesting things about it. And I was so curious about how it intersected with this orphanage. And I was actually in an archive in New York going through the original typewritten meeting minutes of the trustees of the orphanage, trying to find out if they were talking about this baseball situation at all. When I read about these children who had been admitted to the orphanage who were bald because of these x-ray treatments they had gotten from a doctor. And so then I wrote my first book, Orphan 8, based on that. But all this material about Babe Ruth and Jacob Rupert and the Yankees, it just like kind of stayed in the back of my mind. And it was really when I put it together with this kind of a mystery of why Jacob Rupert left a fortune to this sort of unknown, unmarried younger actress that I thought, well, I can invent a story that fits into this sort of historical situation. And it would give me the opportunity to really explore that time period, kind of, Prohibition era New York City, from these two really specific perspectives, from the perspectives of a gay man in New York at that time and the perspective of a single working woman who was known as a bachelor girl. And they were kind of connected through Jacob Rupert. So that's how this novel came to be.
Wow. So a lot of research, right? And
Mhm.
Yeah.
then kind of cultivating this relationship.
Did you find it hard to find like resources, like especially on the gay scene in that
Mhm.
time? Like, was it documented well? Did you have to really go digging? I'm just really curious. Like, it
Mhm.
seems like such a good snapshot of the
Mhm.
time period.
I'll give credit where credit's due. This book called Gay New York by George Chauncey. George Chauncey's a historian. He did all the digging and he
Perfect.
did incredible archival research. It's very difficult sometimes to research a population or a subset of our culture that is not, front page of the New York Times. And he used police records. He used all these interesting archives. It was really George Chauncey's book, Gay New York, that inspired the whole world that my character Albert inhabits. And when I read this book, Gay New York, what really struck me was, not so much like there were gay people in the past, because that's just true of all times in all the world. But it's how do people understand themselves? What possibilities are there for them to think about how they fit into the rest of their social group, whatever it is? And in Gay New York, George Chauncey kind of explained that at that time, in especially New York City, the the way gay men understood themselves was very different from the way we think about what is LGBTQ today. And so that's what I really wanted to explore with my character, Albert. And so there are times I just reread Bachelor Girl, and there are times when I'm like, ooh, ouch, he has such negative feelings and such negative messages. But I really wanted to explore, how would a character come to accept himself in a very particular context?
Absolutely. I think I also picked up on that in
Yeah.
reading. We're still chugging along here, but in regards to some of the language,
Mhm.
name calling,
Mhm.
definitely, in his verbiage, and then maybe even just in the way he thinks about himself. So
Mhm.
I definitely saw that. Happy
Mhm.
we made strides, of
Yeah.
course, but definitely imperative, I would say, in putting yourself
Mhm.
in that time.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted the novel to feel like you were reading a book that could have been written at that time. One of the ways I do my research is I read a lot of things that were written at the time that I'm writing about. So I read a lot of novels from the 1920s and 30s and 40s. And there were a number of novels with gay themes. They always had to end in tragedy, otherwise they wouldn't be published. So on the one hand, it was like, wow, here's some representation and kind of an amazing story. And then everybody dies. So it's heavy. It was heavy.
Definitely. And did that like sort of play into like I was interested in how you split it between Helen's
Mhm.
and Albert's
Mhm.
perspective. Did that help you to decide like who was going to tell what part of the
Mhm.
story and that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, when I first started the book, it was only Albert, and Helen kind of came along a little later to balance things out. And then she ended up, I think of Helen as the protagonist because it's Helen's choices and decisions that really drive the story. And Albert, I think because he's living part of a secret life, he's not able to make as many choices, I think. And then I also was really interested in Helen's evolving understanding of Albert. They love each other genuinely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but she thinks she's sort of saving him from himself for a while, and she's at times she's a bit selfish about wanting to keep Albert, focused on her. And so as the book goes on, her understanding of their relationship and her kind of respect for him develops. And so I didn't want her to be um, just like super progressive right away. I wanted her to be a person of her time as well, generous and kind-hearted, but again, limited.
Right. And ready to grow as the
Mm.
time goes on.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I definitely thought Helen was
Mhm.
also interesting. I'd love to dive into her experience. I know you
Yeah.
said it's interesting to hear that Albert was first and then Helen came.
Mhm.
So what was the thought process behind her character development? And there are some tidbits you just told us, but maybe more in that writing process.
Helen Wayant was a real woman who did inherit from Jacob Rupert more than his own relatives. And for a while, she was part owner of the New York Yankees. Um, so I just thought, first of all, that's amazing because I never knew that there were women owners of the New York Yankees. Really, all I know about her, besides these newspaper articles when the inheritance was announced, and these newspapermen like crowded into her house, and they're like, why you? Why did he leave you money? And she said to them, she said, I don't know. We were just friends. She said, he never even took me dancing. So I was like, okay, what else then? Because the newspapermen all assumed she was his younger mistress, and perhaps that is the truth. But I wanted to think about what other kind of connection could explain this show of affection, this really generous bequest, but also that she would be surprised by it. So all I knew about her was that she was an actress, and I don't think there's a whole lot to be found about the real woman. And I didn't look too hard because I really wanted this character to be someone that I developed from my imagination. And it was really fun because I was like, okay, she's an actress. So then I started reading plays that were performed at the time. I went to a revival of a Eugene O'Neill play in New York. I went to a revival of Shuffle Along, a stage production that was on at the time. It was in revival in New York a few years ago. I read about the theater. And so I just developed this whole career for her, kind of, again, in that sense that she's a bachelor girl. She's a single independent woman who wants a career. And I really enjoyed this deep dive into the theater and how things worked. And I also wanted her, this is not giving away too much because it's pretty soon in the book. She has, I don't know how much you want me to say to give away things, but yeah, she's suffering from a lot of tragedy when we first meet her. She's recovering from a really dangerous and life-threatening abortion because the theater director got her pregnant and was never going to marry her. And she doesn't even quite realize everything that's happened to her yet. It is a bit of a surprise in the book, so I don't know what you'll decide to share from this, but she has to claw her way back from tragedy and figure out what does it mean for her to be a woman now.
Right, because her life is completely changed. I remember reading that part of the book and just being like,
Mhm.
no,
Yeah.
I was like originally thinking she is pregnant. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That was
Mhm.
my first gut
Yeah.
reaction. And
Mhm.
then to hear in full from her mother, oh, the heartbreaking reality, because I mean, during that time, being pregnant is one thing, right? And to hear that, but to now realize it may, it's never going to happen. And
Mhm.
she didn't know what was going on and
Mhm.
why she was sick. And I just, oh, my heart.
That scene, like with
Uh,
them sitting at that table, oh my
Oh,
gosh.
yeah.
yeah.
It was so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I definitely resonated with that and
Yeah.
I'm ready for Helen to kind of find her
Mhm.
power, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And to
And
kind of,
it's, as the book goes on, she keeps trying to find her power, and through her career, she wants to be an actress again. She ends up working the theater in a different way. She has ambition, but when Jacob Rupert takes a more active role in her life, at first it seems like he's such a benefactor, he's such a supporter, but he also has his own agenda, and he wants her to be available, to be his friend. And so she has to make some choices too. And what I really liked about developing the character of Jacob Rupert is that in some ways I know a lot about him. Almost every detail you read about him in the novel, I did research. I don't know what he thought or said, but all these little things, the dog shows, the peacocks, the monkeys, the Arctic expeditions. I mean, all of this, he was so eccentric and so interesting, but still mysterious. And so it seemed like the other characters could read into him and they could be mistaken about him the same way, the reader might be for a while. So I really enjoyed that. I knew all these cool details about Jacob Rupert, but he was still kind of a mystery.
Yeah, definitely. I have like 50 pages left in the book, and I'm still wondering, like,
Mhm.
how is this all gonna wrap up? Like, how did we get from the prologue even to this point to the end? Like, it's just a really good story.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I liked starting with the prologue because um, it gives a little something away, but it gives you a point, like you have a sense you're moving towards something. These three people are going to be really connected through the whole book, but the prologue asks the main questions, like why? And
Yeah.
Albert thinks he knows, and maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. Helen isn't sure why. Helen's mother is like, what is she thinking about all this? So I enjoyed setting it up that way.
Not to steer from our characters,
Mhm.
if anything does come back up with the process, feel free to chime in. But I just wanted to know, what was your favorite part of writing this novel after Orphan Number 8?
Orphan Number 8 was very connected to my family history. So I had this really like personal feeling about a lot of it. And it was to talk about doctors conducting medical experiments on children is really sad. Um, Even though with Orphan Number 8, the theme was forgiveness and how do you get to that point. So it was really meaningful to me. With Bachelor Girl, it was so fun to say, here's this subject that I'm just super interested in. And nobody in this book is like one of my relatives. So it was just really fun to create this world. And one of the things I enjoyed the most is that you can go to New York City now, and a lot of these places are still there. So you can still see the wall and the gates around the property that used to be the orphanage. You can still go down those steps to where the polo grounds were. I went to the apartment building where Jacob Rupert moved after he knocked down his mansion. That's still there. So it was really fun to kind of go back through New York City and imagine it at this time.
Absolutely, especially during the Prohibition
Mhm.
era.
Yeah.
I definitely think that that's a glamorized time
Mhm.
too. So
Yeah.
everything just, when you envision New York City, like, I'm ready for a weekend to go out there. I feel like this book really captures what you want the experience to look like. Even being in the train, the L, whatever, being in there like sardines after the game, right? Like, that's the experience. So I thought that was great writing. I felt like I was there. I felt like I was amongst these characters.
Oh, thank you. I have I have a book all about the L trains. I went to there's a museum in Brooklyn called the Transit Museum where you can actually go inside old subway cars. And so I did that. I really like, as much as possible, to have an experiential process with my research. One of the best things was I got to go to Eagles Rest because Jacob Rupert really did build this mansion up on the Hudson. It's a school now. And I went there, and the director gave me a tour of the whole place. And so when you're there in the novel, that's real. Everything there is real. And the thing I discovered when I was there was this sliding door between the two bedrooms,
I
which I
was just
hadn't
gonna
known
say, did
about.
the pocket door exist?
It's when you're a writer, that's the kind of thing you're like, okay, well, that's got to be a scene because I didn't even think of this. This is amazing. But on the other hand, there's a moment where Rupert and Helen are sitting on a window bench and looking out of the lawn. And I had already written that. And when I went to tour the place, there was the window bench in his room, just as I had imagined it. So sometimes the imagination comes first, and sometimes the research sparks the imagination.
That's
So
amazing.
cool.
Wow. I didn't even think that some of these things could be so real. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So the proof
Yeah.
is right there, right?
Yeah. And
If
speak
when you read it, if you can't really tell the difference between what was real or could have been real or seems imaginary, that's really the effect I'm trying to achieve.
Definitely. It worked. It really worked. And not to get away from the book, we can always go back. I just
Sure.
have this like question, speaking of journeys and all that. Can you just take us through a little bit like your journey through PA to Ship, onward from Ship? Like, we know you taught there, but we just weren't really sure what, or like how that led to your authorness. That sort of thing. So you're
I
just
like that. In graduate school, it was the late 1980s. I came to Ship in 1992. And when I was in graduate school, computers for writing was this whole new thing. And that's what I wrote my dissertation about, was this new field of using computers for teaching writing. And writing teachers thought it was just going to be revolutionary. But like most things with technology, it makes things more efficient. And so where teachers thought that once students were, they would say this, they were free from the tyranny of handwriting, they would express themselves with joy. And they were like, no, they're just done sooner so they can go do other things. So that was what my dissertation was about. And I got the job at Shippensburg because they had just gotten a new computer lab and nobody in the English department really knew what to do about it. And so that's what they were searching for, someone who could come in and run the writing program and who could deal with these computers. So that was me. And over the years at Shippensburg, I wrote more and more creative writing as the years went by. And so I started teaching creative nonfiction writing. I taught a fiction writing class. I taught introduction to creative writing. So as I did more and more creative writing and I was able to teach more creative writing, it kind of slowly shifted my career away from a focus on computers and writing to creative writing.
Very cool.
Nice. Yeah. And how many books have you written in total?
So my third book, good segue. Here's the third book, Counting Lost Stars. So this one comes out in July, and I'm working on a fourth one now. And I took an early retirement because I thought, what an incredible opportunity. Like, HarperCollins is publishing my books. This is amazing. And I'd been at Chip a long time. So they had an early retirement incentive. And I was like, I'm going to take it and take a chance. And my partner was living in Saratoga Springs, New York. So I kind of said, let's have a new start. So I came up here. So I'm in Saratoga Springs, New York right now. And I'm a full-time writer.
That's
Awesome.
amazing.
Yeah.
I love it. Imagine just being able to dive into your projects,
Yes.
do that research that you want to do to make sure that each book, novel, topic, even theme is top notch. So, I mean, we should talk a little bit about this next novel coming
Okay.
out. I'm sure just as much research, creativity is going into this one like the past two.
Yeah. So Counting Lost Stars, here, I'll hold her up again. It's about a young woman in New York in 1960. She's working as a computer programmer. She's going to college and she becomes pregnant. This theme about reproductive choices and the choices that women face is really interesting for me. So anyway, in Counting Lost Stars, Rita Klein is a young woman working as a computer programmer when she becomes pregnant and gives her baby up for adoption through an unwed mother's home, which was a very common thing. The 1950s and 60s, there was a sort of whole industry around unwed mothers. And it was a bit of a system. So birth control was illegal unless you were married. And yet, you know, men were still men. So women got pregnant. And it was very common to just go off to this unwed mother's home. You pretend you're off visiting a sick aunt. You come back a few months later and you pretend it never happened. And this was an experience that millions of American women had. And so that's the start for my character, Rita Klein. But Counting Lost Stars is also a dual perspective. So the other character is named Cornelia Vogel, and she's back in World War II in Holland. And the thing that connects these two characters as the novel goes on is that they both work with computers. Kind of going back to my dissertation, I guess, this interest I had. In the 1960s, women were really making big strides in computer programming. Programming was the tedious part with attention to detail that they were like, oh, ladies can do that because we want to build machines, the guy said. And so women were really instrumental in early computer programming. But even in the 1940s, during World War II, there were a lot of punch card computers in Europe. And actually, the Nazis used punch card computer technology to organize the Holocaust. The big concentration camps they were called a labor office, and they would have a punch card computer. And so each prisoner had a card, and every day you'd like sort through them to keep track of who is where and what. And to me, that was like especially horrifying because, it's this thing we think of as almost unthinkably evil. And yet here's this business machine that's producing your reports every day. And there's something about that contrast that was really interesting for me. So in Counting Lost Stars, these two characters are on their different tracks. In 1960 New York, Rita meets a Dutch Holocaust survivor, and he is searching for information about his lost mother. And eventually that search connects to Cordelia from the World War II time period. And they all kind of come together in New York in 1960 in the Empire State Building.
What a better, like New York backdrop. Like,
Yeah.
so classic.
It's a really New York book. That was a little meandering explanation, but it's kind of a sweeping book. And again, I don't know much about theater. I don't know much about baseball. I don't know much about computers, but the research and learning as much as I need to know is really an interesting part of the process for me.
That's amazing. And it all just come full circle when it comes to your books. So we're excited. Thank you so much, Kim, for
Yes, thank
joining
you.
us today.
Thank
If you at home want any information on these books, just head over to our website, fox43.com. We're going to link not only Bachelor Girl, but also some other opportunities and also the new book that's coming out in July. So people can potentially pre-order or get it on their want to read list.
Oh, thanks. That Goodreads want to read list is it just warms my heart every day. So I really appreciate that. And on my website, I do a blog where I talk a bit more about the research behind all my books. So that's a fun thing to take a look at too.
Absolutely. Kim, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
everybody
Thank you
will
so
see you soon.
much.